Next stop on our journey to Hatfield and beyond is York. This is a city that's had its fair share of bad luck in the last year, hit by floods, then by rail chaos. In Selby, outside York, is this flourishing architect's practice. Their clients are spread far and wide across the country. The railways are their life support system. Normally, London is just 1 hour, 50 minutes away. We left them a camcorder during the Hatfield crisis to let off steam.
The journey is anything between 3.5 and 5 hours. You've got to get up a lot earlier, which is pretty annoying. You get a lot less time down in London. Most of the time the days are wasted. Quite a few meetings have been cancelled because of the fact that they can't actually make the meetings because I've no idea what time the train's getting in.
Getting back home last night, I had to actually go to the station to ask when a train was going to be because I couldn't get through on the helpline, and they advised me not to even bother because there's been so many problems with the trains.
Because of the trains were unreliable, I had to result in going to London in the car, as thousands of others presumably did, because they just had to sit it out on the M1 for hours and hours, which took forever. But that is not an enjoyable drive.
Since David Ward founded the company 12 years ago, it's prospered, which is just as well, because many businesses this size could not survive the losses caused by the rail crisis.
I worked out this as a company as a whole, it's costing us in the order of £3,500 a week. So far, that's cost us in the order of £40,000, and by the time the rail delays have been sorted out, of course there's no real date when that will happen at the moment, it's going to exceed £50,000, which is a substantial amount for us to bear.
And all the way through, so these colours.
Somebody ought to pay us it back. It's not our fault.
But I mean, what we're able...
The compensation we've got back is figures like £7, £11 for a journey delayed for over 2 hours, which is ridiculous.
Today they're off to London to ensure they get to a meeting the next day. More hotel bills, lost working days, lower profits. This crisis has cost the economy an estimated £5 billion. None of this should have happened because back in 1995, New Labour in opposition said they wouldn't put up with a privatised railway.
Let no one doubt that whatever happens to the railways in the next 18 months, and nobody is more committed than I am, a Labour government will deliver on our commitment to a publicly owned, publicly accountable railway system.
In government, Mr. Blair promised to be radical and to change Britain with what he described as a modernising revolution. But as he also said, government is about tough choices. New Labour's commitment to put the railways back together again was no longer a commitment.
I oppose that Tory railway set-up with every fibre of my being, and particularly coming from a railway family. And the record of privatisation confirms my judgment all the more. But as Tony Blair said, we don't approach these questions from dogma. The question is it in the public interest, and does it work?
Now New Labour had new commitments. What Mr. Blair described in his election manifesto as a covenant with the people to safeguard the environment and to fight pollution and congestion. But once in power, according to leaked cabinet notes, the Prime Minister decided that transport was not a priority.
He spoke of having a covenant with the people, and one of the promises he made was to deliver a better, less congested transport system. Do you think he has delivered on that?
I don't think he has to date, no, not at all. There's no major improvement in any aspect of it so far. In fact, I think particularly the road network seems a lot more congested than it was before. In fact, one of the reasons we travel by train as much as we can is because the M1 and the A1 are terribly congested now.
So when Mr. Blair talks of there being a revolution, what's your response to that?
Well, it must be happening somewhere else. It isn't happening where I am.
By 1998, with nearly £800 million in profit since privatisation, Railtrack was beginning to spend much more on the network. But the quality of the track had deteriorated, and it was hard to catch up, especially since they still didn't know enough about it.
I've been pressing the company to establish a reliable and comprehensive database of the condition, capability and capacity of their assets. I've met some resistance from the company in that respect. The company has had 3 attempts to create the asset database and still has failed.
Although unaware of just how run down their track and signals were, Railtrack came up with a plan to keep them in service beyond their expected replacement date. It was called Project Destiny. So, for signals, although 38% of them had been rated as having 0 remaining life, Railtrack planned to extend the life of many of them for several years.
Project Destiny was a way of sweating the assets, of renewing the assets based on their condition rather than simply their age. Now, there's nothing wrong in making that change in maintenance practice as long as you have a sound knowledge of the underlying condition of the assets. If you don't have that, then that is potentially a difficult and dangerous practice.
Why?
Because the assets may fail, as indeed they did in Hatfield. Or you may be storing up a backlog of maintenance which is going to be very disruptive to tackle all at one time. You're going to bunch things together.
Project Destiny also prolonged the life of ballast and sleepers, so that some sections of the track were not so firmly bedded down. This can explain why cups of coffee sometimes spill when you're on a train. Railtrack's culture of patch and mend further illustrated that maintenance was not being given the priority it needed, a culture that contributed to Hatfield. Next stop on our journey south, Doncaster. It may be 165 miles from London, but in recent years Doncaster has seen an increase in commuting to the capital, part of the huge growth in rail travel due to sustained economic prosperity. Our London-bound commuter, James Janes, is making one of the 200 million more train journeys since privatisation. His £6,500 season ticket goes to GNER's bank balance. Almost none of it goes to Railtrack, who are responsible for maintaining a track being hammered by increasing wear and tear.
Most of your £6,000 goes to GNR and doesn't, in fact, go to Railtrack. That's the way the system is structured.
If you look over the past few months, I'd argue that GNR have been performing better than Railtrack. So I'm happy with that.
Railtrack have often complained that because they didn't share in the benefits of increased rail travel, they had no commercial incentive to spend more on the upkeep of the track, even though more trains were going over them.
In practice, at the time of privatisation, growth was not envisaged. And that is why Railtrack, its revenue line was fixed, by and large. It didn't participate in the benefits of growth. It wasn't actually even encouraged to invest in creating extra capacity in the network.
Now, Railtrack say, of course, that they weren't rewarded for this growth, and therefore there was no incentive for them to spend a great deal more money on maintaining the track. Have they got a point?
I think that's total rubbish. Their job is to maintain and run the network. I think there was an extraordinary arrogance in Railtrack, who didn't really believe that this growth in passenger volumes perhaps was going to go on, and therefore this was a short-term phenomenon. They didn't need to worry about it, and therefore weren't perhaps putting the investment in place.
By late 1998, the consequences of Railtrack's repeated failure to give track maintenance the attention it deserved began to show. Broken rails, a fact of life on any railway, rose dramatically.
The broken rails is a fair indication of the state of maintenance, but it should have rung warning bells earlier than it did.